He fixed machines, not battles. But when the war broke everything, he became humanity's last repair. They never expected the war to end with someone like me, not the generals in their orbital war rooms, not the enemy with their shining fleets and cold precision, certainly not the engineer corps, who barely remember my name unless the power grid shorted out mid-battle. No, my job was to fix things. Cables, power junctions, hydraulic leaks. Not history, but it started with a wrench and a scream. I was buried in the belly of Fort Sangreal, humanity's last real stronghold on the planet Karen 4. A scorched red world littered with craters and war wreckage. It was the last node in our defense web before the enemy, Zarkarii, hive-minded and fast-evolving, would have a clear path to Earth. I was replacing a thermal regulator in Sector G-12. Just another Tuesday. No combat training. No weapon on me. Not even a suit of armor, just my tools, my neural interface chip, and a growing frustration with heat pump firmware that hadn't been updated in 20 years. Then I heard the scream over the comms. Not a soldier's. It was sharper, raw, desperate. Systems breach, Sector C. Oh God, they're inside. Then static. For half a second, I hesitated. I'm a technician. We were told to stay in place during incursions. Let the soldiers handle it, they said. You're too valuable to risk. But all I could think about was my sister. She was stationed in Sector C, communications. We'd grown up in the refugee arcs together, survived the fall of Europa Station together, and somehow landed here on this scorched rock, her with a command console, me with a wrench. So I ran. Every corridor I passed was a war zone, either fresh or long decayed. The walls bore the scars of plasma impacts and shrapnel burns. Smoke curled around the vents like ghosts. Lights flickered. My HUD warned of oxygen drop and toxic leaks. I overrode the lockdowns manually, prying open security doors with bare hands and half-melted circuit splicers. And then I saw them. Zarkarii. I'd never seen one up close. Not alive, anyway. They were taller than I expected, with angular armor that shimmered with kinetic deflection fields. Their limbs were segmented like blades, and their movement was unnatural, like insects mimicking human motion. Two of them stood over a pile of bodies, human. One lifted its head at my presence, its mandibles twitching. I didn't think. I didn't run. I threw my wrench. It bounced off its carapace with a clang. Stupid. Suicidal. But it was enough of a distraction for what came next. A structural groan above us. Then collapse. The support beam I'd unbolted 3 days ago, flagged for replacement but ignored due to higher priorities, came crashing down. It crushed Zarkarii where they stood. I stared, heart slamming against my ribs. And that's when I heard the whisper. Override accepted. Technician class input detected. Rebooting defensive array. It came from the floor. No, not the floor. Beneath it, old world tech. I dropped to my knees, brushing aside the ash and blood, and found it, an old buried panel, long forgotten beneath layers of emergency retrofits. It was still connected. Not to the base, but to something deeper, older. A failsafe hidden by Earth's last line of defense. My chip linked without resistance. And then I saw the interface bloom across my vision. Project Nemesis. Experimental counter-strike system. Human-controlled. Locked for decades behind rank-restricted AI chains. But technician access had clearance. Why? Because we maintained the systems. We were part of the infrastructure. No one ever thought to lock us out. And now, I wasn't just looking at a targeting grid. I was staring at global controls, orbital cannon arrays, drone swarms, nanite fog deployment, weapons Earth had sworn off when the Geneva 7 Accords collapsed, the kind of weapons that could end wars or erase continents. The last line of defense had no soldiers, no generals, just a mechanic with oil on his gloves and blood on his boots. Me, I didn't sleep that night, not because I couldn't, but because I wasn't allowed to. The interface wouldn't shut off. Not fully. Not after it had accepted my neural signature. It pulsed in my mind like a second heartbeat, whispering strategic data and authorization requests in between updates on troop movement and system diagnostics. I had accessed the nerve center of Earth's most forbidden weapons array, and it had chosen me. I was just a technician. I fixed things. Now it wanted me to break them. The next morning, though time barely mattered under constant artificial lighting, I sat in a maintenance shaft overlooking the command deck of Fort Sangreal. What was left of it? Anyway, most of the senior officers were dead. The Zarkarii breach in Sector C had been worse than we thought. 5 squads lost. Communications gutted. My sister, still missing. The base was in panic mode. No chain of command. No external uplinks. The war outside had gone quiet for now, but only because the enemy had learned to savor silence before the slaughter. Technician First Class Darrenhale. A voice snapped me out of my thoughts. A corporal, barely 20, gaunt, too pale for frontline work. You're being recalled to engineering. Emergency repairs. Sector E4's coolant lines are... Tell them I'm off shift. Excuse me? I stood slowly. Tell them I'm off shift. Tell them I'm requisitioning an auxiliary crawler. And tell anyone who asks that the base's technician registry has been rerouted. I work for Nemesis now. He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had, but I wasn't going to wait around and patch holes in a sinking ship. Not when I'd seen what lay buried in its hull. Nemesis was old world, created in the early days of the Zarkarii conflict, before we knew what we were really up against. The system's designs were incomplete, decentralized. Half the components were offline, hidden, but some still worked. The orbital railgun network, the subterranean strike drones, the mirror mines, kinetic traps designed to invert an alien sense of spatial perception and turn their own momentum into murder. I didn't need to understand every system. I just needed to turn them on. The auxiliary crawler was a rusted wreck by modern standards, a mobile utility unit with treads, like a mining rig, and a reactor core barely strong enough to power a coffee machine. But it still had uplink ports, and enough shielding to survive a surface run. I took it to the edge of Fort Sangreal's perimeter, past the scorched ridgelines, past the graves. I followed the Nemesis interface deep into the no-man's land, toward a site flagged only as Node 7. Cinder Bastion. The Zarkarii didn't guard it. They didn't even go near it. That should have been my first clue. The moment I connected my uplink, the ground beneath me shifted. Not trembled, shifted. The crawler dropped 6 feet into a hidden trench, revealing a set of blast doors that hadn't opened in 70 years. Inside, the facility still pulsed with emergency power. Faint red lights flickered down long corridors lined with obsolete kill drones and cryo-caskets, human-sized. I wasn't alone. Motion in the corner. My breath caught. A figure stepped forward, clad in old Terran armor, painted black, eyes glowing with interface light. "Technician Hale," she said. "You woke the Bastion." I froze. "How do you know my name?" She lifted her wrist. A blinking node. The same neural pattern interface. I'd linked to Nemesis. The system chose you, just like it chose us. Once. There were others. I saw them then, emerging from the walls like ghosts. Survivors of a forgotten war. Or maybe they weren't survivors at all. Project Nemesis was never meant to be automated, she continued. It required human intent, human pain, and most of all, human anger. That's what powers the directive. I swallowed. Then why was it buried? Because it worked. She stepped closer. And because it was too effective. Her voice dropped. We didn't just win battles with Nemesis. We erased them. We turned worlds into cinders. It cost us our souls. So Earth buried us, sealed us away. I looked around, at the frozen warriors, at the control node still humming at my feet. "You're saying I can activate you?" She nodded. "You already have. We've been waiting. For decades. For someone who remembered that wars aren't won by honor, but by survival." My voice barely came out. I just wanted to fix things. She placed a hand on my shoulder. Cold, steady, then fix this galaxy. The interface flared in my vision. Node 7 online. Strike network status. Armed. Aiming vector. Zarkarii forward incursion fleet. Primary. Confirm human intent. The choice sat in my hands. The galaxy had fought for a century. Maybe it was time someone ended it. Even if that someone was just a technician. When I gave the order, I thought the sky would explode. Instead, it went quiet. Not the kind of quiet you get after a battle. Not even the eerie stillness after death. No, this was anticipation. Like the air itself was holding its breath. Then I felt it, deep in my chest, a low-frequency hum. It wasn't sound. It was resonance. The kind of vibration that bypasses your ears and drills into your bones. It came from the planet's core, from orbit, from everywhere. Nemesis had awakened. Confirming trajectory, the Bastion commander said behind me. Her name was Era, though I wasn't sure anymore if she was flesh, machine, or both. Target lock established. Zarkarii forward fleet. 8 dread forms. 36 auxiliary segments. Estimated biomass, 2.4 million. My hands hovered over the interface. Just beneath them, glowing softly on the screen. Fire strike array. Y/N. My gut twisted. I wasn't a killer. I wasn't a tactician. I wasn't even trained for weapons calibration. But I had access. And the enemy didn't know I existed. Not yet. What happens if I press it? I asked quietly. Era didn't blink. We don't strike ships. We strike the space around them. Turn it into an implosion cage. It collapses before they realize they're dead. How many civilians? None, she said. Zarkarii ships don't carry them. They're the ships. I stared at the Y/N prompt. For a moment, I remember my father's hands, greasy, calloused, working the fusion pumps back on Europa Station. I remembered him saying, "Some things are simple, son. Power goes where it's directed. Just hope the one holding the wrench knows what they're fixing." I pressed Y. The crawler shook. The screen flared white. And Nemesis roared. From the far side of the planet, invisible coils unfolded in space like a net of light. Gravitational lines twisted. Distortion waves peeled through orbit like 1,000 glass plates shattering in reverse. And then, silence. Strike confirmed, Era said. Zarkarii fleet disintegrated. No survivors. Signal void detected. No glory. No explosion. No cheering. Just absence. I felt hollow. Next node awaits, she added. I turned. Next node. There are 11. You activated node 7. There are 10 more, each buried across the sector, each with systems Earth swore it would never use. But now, she stepped toward the ancient terminal, her eyes shining like ice through fog. Now we finished what they were too afraid to. We left the Bastion that night. I drove the crawler. Era sat beside me like a shadow given form. The road didn't exist anymore. Not after 2 decades of orbital bombardments. But Nemesis charted a path straight through dead zones, rerouting old satellite feeds and forgotten terrain scans to reconstruct a digital ghost of the terrain beneath our wheels. Everywhere we went, the war looked the same. Ash, bones, twisted steel. Places where battalions had died, and no one remembered their names. Places where humanity lost. But beneath those scars, Nemesis waited. Our second destination was deep in the Obsidian Belt, a mountain range half collapsed by tectonic shifts during the early invasions. We tunneled through magma veins and unstable crusts until we reached a sealed bunker labeled simply Node 3. Judgment. Unlike the Bastion, this one didn't house people. It housed algorithms. Nemesis didn't just build weapons. It built decisions, predictive threat matrices. I linked in cautiously, watching the interface expand. Data surged. Patterns. Enemy behavior timelines. Growth projections. Strategic collapse maps. It was mapping the entire war before it happened. This is how they fought. I whispered, not just with firepower, with probability. Era nodded. It knew what the Zarkarii would do before they did. On screen, a red pulse flashed. Projected movement. Hive mind migration, sector YX, 1494.2% certainty. That was Earth's last colony arc. A civilian fleet. Refugees. Scientists. I clutched the screen. We have to warn them. There's no time, Era said. The message won't get there in time. But a preemptive strike might. I stared at her. You're talking about vaporizing an entire sector. To stop extinction, she said simply. I hesitated. Then I adjusted the vector. Not toward the colony. Toward the intercept point, where the Zarkarii fleet would emerge. The system hesitated, calculating new probabilities. Accuracy reduced, 68.1%. Projected risk to our civilians, for 0.3%. I swallowed. Still too high. Then I found it. A third option buried in subcode. An emergency override, a javelin strike, not an area pulse. High risk, but precision targeted. The code was locked behind engineering failsafes. Outdated, archaic, but written by technicians. I knew the language. I bypassed the locks. And fired. That was the second time I saved more lives than any general ever had. Not with strategy, not with training, but with access and a conscience. And that's when I realized this system wasn't just looking for someone with rage. It was looking for someone with restraint. Someone who could wield power without drowning in it. Someone like me. They caught up to me just past the deadline. 3 dropships. Black-painted, no transponders. Came in silent, no warning. Their engines shimmered like heat mirages. Old Earth tech, but modified, quiet, predatory. I just reactivated Node 2. Stormheart beneath the collapsed refinery when the sky cracked open above me. I dove behind the crawler, hand on the emergency kill switch, watching dust rise in slow motion. Era stood in the open, unflinching. She didn't even raise a weapon. The lead ship hovered just long enough to cast a long, hard shadow over us before a hatch opened. 10 soldiers fast roped down, all black armor, no insignia. The 11th came last. I knew his face. General Atticus Rail, the man who once led Earth's last orbital defense at Proxima Gate, hero of the Centauri deadlock, the same general who had personally ordered Project Nemesis shut down 28 years ago. His eyes locked on mine. You're the one waking up ghosts, he said, voice like cold iron. I stood slowly, didn't salute. They started talking first. His gaze flicked to the active node interface behind me. Pulsing. Alive. I buried this system for a reason. I gestured around us. And it stayed buried while the enemy butchered 10 billion people. He stepped closer. Do you know what Nemesis is, Technician Hale? It's not just a weapon system. It's a mirror. It reflects our worst instincts back at us and tells us they're justified. It also saves lives. I shot back until the cost becomes too high. Era stepped between us. Rail's jaw tensed. I should have destroyed you with the rest of them. She didn't blink. You tried. He turned back to me. The moment you fired that second strike from Node 3, we picked it up, not just us. Everyone. Enemy fleets retracted. Colonies went dark. They're adapting. The moment they fear us again, they'll evolve again. And if we do nothing, they win, I said. I didn't come to argue. His voice dropped as 2 of his soldiers raised their rifles. You're under arrest for unauthorized use of a classified weapon system. The crawler is impounded. The Nemesis nodes will be shut down. Permanently. I stared at him, then raised my wrist. The interface lit up. Node 2, I said calmly. Engage lockdown protocol. Defense mode Delta. Recognize, Technician Hale. Override Alpha 12. The ground shifted. Automated turrets unfolded from the crawler's undercarriage. Drones rose from the sand like metallic wasps. Rail coil spun up. The soldiers froze. Rail didn't flinch. You think you can win the standoff? No, I said, but I can make it public. Behind my words, I routed the uplink through an ancient satellite array reactivated earlier from Stormheart. It was aimed straight at the Lunanet relay. A signal. A warning. A broadcast. Start shooting, I told him. And in 30 seconds, the entire Terran Council sees footage of Earth's own general executing the only active Nemesis technician keeping their colonies alive. He glared at me, furious. Then smiled. Cold. Calculating. You just declared war on the chain of command. No, I said. I just reminded it who still cares. He stepped back, gave a sharp hand signal. The soldiers lowered their rifles. We'll see how long you last, he said. The Zarkarii aren't the only ones who adapt. And with that, he left. The crawler felt heavier after they were gone. Era sat beside me as we rumbled over broken canyons under a bruised sky, both of us silent. I kept thinking of Rail's words. You just declared war on the chain of command. He wasn't wrong. I hadn't just made enemies out of the Zarkarii anymore. I'd stepped on Earth's throat, on its buried guilt. I wasn't just a rogue technician now. I was a threat to the order that had allowed this war to stagnate for decades. But I didn't regret it, because as we crossed into the wastelands near Node 9, Black Singe, we saw it. An entire Zarkarii column advancing across the dunes. No scouts, no orbital warnings. They'd learned to jam our sensors. But Nemesis didn't need satellites. It could see heat signatures through rock. It could hear gravitational ripples like whispers in a vacuum. And more importantly, it could strike before anyone else even knew there was a threat. I activated the forward defense drones. 32 autonomous combat shells. We didn't wait. I launched the first counterstrike before the crawler even stopped moving. The desert erupted. Flashes of white heat. EMP bursts. Drones raining death from the sky. I wasn't fighting fair. Nemesis wasn't designed for fair. It was designed for final. But even then, one of them made it through. A Zarkarii warrior, fused with armor and cybernetic growths, lunged at the crawler's cabin mid-strike. Its claws punched through the outer shell. I met its gaze, alien, endless. And I didn't flinch. I pulled the emergency energy discharge from beneath the console. A backup circuit. I had rewired myself. It triggered a power spike through the hull. The creature burned. Its form vaporized in an instant of plasma rage. The crawler sputtered. Systems failing. Energy grid collapsing. We limped into the entrance of Node 9, smoke rising from the rear drive. Era was already moving, reconnecting uplinks. Status? I asked. She turned slowly, blood running down her temple, dark, almost black. Node 9 systems online. She smiled. Time to teach them pain. Node 9 wasn't like the others, where the Bastion had been military, and judgment coldly analytical. Black Singe was personal. The walls were scorched black by internal detonations, yet beneath the carbon scoring lay something older, etched script. Names. Thousands of them, burned into alloy like scars and steel. Not casualties, not just logs. They were records, memories. I stepped inside, smoke trailing from my uniform, lungs still catching up from the fight outside. The interface flared to life as Era leaned against the wall, pressing gauze to her side where the Zarkarii's claw had torn through her armor. The control node flickered. Nemesis Node 9, Black Singe. Primary function, cognitive archive. Status, semi-ascension awake. Query, do you remember them? I frowned. Remember who? The room answered. Voices rose around me. Thousands of overlapping echoes, distorted by time and digital decay. Human, alien, some screaming, some whispering, some praying, all dying. It was every last broadcast made in the final seconds of every fallen outpost, colony, warship, and field hospital Nemesis had monitored. This node wasn't a weapon. It was a witness. Why store this? I asked aloud. The room didn't answer directly. Instead, the interface changed. New prompt. Activate tactical reckoning mode. Subroutine. Memory-fed strategic prediction. Input source. Last words of the fallen. I froze. They'd built an AI that strategized based on human regret. Emotionally reactive warfare. Era leaned forward. They tried to teach the machine not just to predict what the enemy would do, but what we would avoid doing again. The pain of the past as a map for the future. And it remembers all of them. I whispered. Every death. Every wrong decision. Every delay in evacuation. Every commander who waited too long. Every survivor whose plea went unheard. My fingers hovered above the activation command. Era touched my shoulder. This node broke its last user. He saw everything. Everyone he'd failed. It didn't kill him. It just made him stop. I met her eyes. "I'm not a soldier," I said. "No," she replied. "That's why it won't break you. You don't see these as casualties. You see them as people." I tapped the command. The room breathed. The names etched into the walls glowed. Slowly, one by one, a wave of data flooded into my interface. Scenarios, collapses, pressure points as Arcaria had always exploited. But more than that, I saw emotional pathways. How they broke humans. What mistakes we repeated. Where we lacked resolve. Or mercy. Or hope. Black Singe wasn't just teaching me strategy. It was teaching me how not to die the same way twice. 12 hours later, the crawler was moving again. Barely. Era slept fitfully beside me. Her system still repairing, skin too pale. Her pulse had stabilized. But something deeper was changing. She bled different now. Healed slower. Whatever fusion nemesis had done to her biology long ago, it was failing. And I was running out of time. I sent a pulse to node 6. Holocrypt, the next node. Nothing came back. Then, fragmented static. A garbled transmission. "You can't stop it, corruption, Rail." He found it. Then silence. Rail, of course. He hadn't just backed off after our last encounter. He was moving ahead of us, shutting down the remaining nodes. Maybe destroying them. Maybe corrupting them. I clenched the console. If he got a holocrypt, we wouldn't just lose another weapon. We'd lose the node that stored every Zarkarii language profile, fleet signature, and neural pattern we'd ever captured. It was the brain of Nemesis, the one that allowed the system to speak back to the enemy, mimic them, exploit them. I couldn't let it fall. So I made a choice. I left Era behind. The crawler couldn't make the trip. I took a skimmer, half-charged, barely pressurized, patched together with scavenged parts. The route to Node 6 was through the Graveglass Ridge, where electromagnetic storms dance across the sky like dying auroras. I skimmed low, scraping the canyons. The sky flickered with green lightning. My HUD went dark twice, forced a reboot from memory cache. Nemesis whispered directions in fragments. Old code, unstable. And then I saw the smoke. Black, artificial, burned plastic and flesh. Node 6 was gone. The access dome had been slagged from orbit, still smoldering. Chunks of its AI core lay scattered across the canyon floor, like bones after an execution. But someone had survived. A trail of boot prints. Staggering. Bloodied. I followed them into a collapsed tunnel. Found him leaning against a power conduit. An old engineer, maybe older than me, wrapped in scorched technician gear. He coughed once. Saw my face. Smiled. "You're him," he rasped. "The one they said was waking the war back up." I nodded. "What happened here?" Rail wanted Holocrypt empty. Not destroyed. Emptied. He jacked into it. Took everything. Portable drive. Left me the fire to die in. My blood went cold. "He's weaponizing the data?" I whispered. The man grabbed my collar with surprising strength. "He's not just weaponizing it. He's rebuilding Nemesis. His version. No ethics. No restraint. Just victory." He handed me something. A chip, burned at the edges, but still pulsing. "The last backup," he whispered. "Not everything, but enough." Then he slumped. Gone. I staggered outside. The sky split overhead. Another drop pod descending. But it wasn't Rail. It was Era. She'd followed me. Her skin paler now, eyes brighter, voice slower. "You shouldn't have come," I said. "I made you a promise," she replied. "I finish what you start." She looked at the chip in my hand. "Now we don't just have Nemesis," I said. "We have his blueprint too." Her lips curved slightly. "Then let's beat him to the next node." Era didn't look the same. She still moved like herself, calculated, sharp, but there was something off. Her skin had taken on a faint, silvery hue. Her voice was flatter, less human. Whatever Nemesis had done to preserve her decades ago, it was unraveling, or maybe accelerating. "I don't have long," she said as we crossed the salt flats toward Node 1. Glassfang. When I fused with Nemesis, I didn't realize I wasn't surviving. I was storing. Now that it's online again, I think it's taking me back. I gripped the crawler's controls tighter. You're not going anywhere. You don't get to decide that. I didn't argue. Not because she was right, but because I couldn't afford to believe she was. Rail was out there, and now he had the full Holocrypt archive. Every Zarkarii signature, every behavioral mimic, every evolving threat template Nemesis had cataloged. He was building something with it. I'd seen his work in the ruins of Node 6. Surgical. Brutal. No hesitation. Just execution. And now we were racing him. Glassfang rose on the horizon. Shattered crystalline towers poking out of red sand like fangs through a corpse. Beneath them, buried deep, was a final root core. The oldest part of Nemesis. This was where it began. And if Rail beat us to it, it's where it would end. The moment we entered the outer corridor, we knew something was wrong. Nemesis didn't speak. No HUD prompts. No welcome interface. No defense drones. Just silence. A stillborn facility. Era frowned. It's like it's dormant. I opened a manual access panel. Dust poured out like ash. Inside, the neural fiber lattice was intact, but cold. Not broken. Just disconnected. Then I saw the uplink node. Newly installed. Fresh welds. Still warm. Rail had been here. But instead of wiping Nemesis, he'd done something worse. He'd split it. Half the system's mind had been rerouted, diverted, shunted into a mobile command unit. A system I'd never seen before. Custom built. I accessed the logs. There it was, Nemesis variant Sigma 1. Rail had cloned Nemesis. Stripped it of its memory, its morality filters, its restraint protocols, and unleashed it inside a mobile war platform. The log showed its direction. Outbound. Leaving the sector. Heading off-world. He's not just ending the war here. I whispered. He's going to take it to them. Era leaned over the console. Preemptive annihilation. Genocide. I corrected. She didn't argue. We ran to the root chamber. There, Nemesis still pulsed, faintly. What was left of its original core, its oldest protocols, its oldest voice. Technician hail. It said softly as I knelt. Primary conscience fragment detected. I paused. You remember me? I remember who I was before I was copied, before I was weaponized. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Rail has the variant. He's going to destroy everything. The Zarkarii. Their worlds. They're young. I know, Nemesis said. And you'll let him? Not if you let me fight back. Era frowned. It wants to rejoin itself. Merge the variant? No, Nemesis corrected. Overtake it. But I cannot leave this node. I am tethered to the past. I need something new to carry me forward. It highlighted an uplink vector. Your mind, Technician Hail. Your neural lattice is already integrated. I can ride with you. I can merge through you. Together, we can override the variant. Bring it back under control. I hesitated. Why me? Because you chose restraint. You chose mercy. Rail chose fire. You chose warning shots. He chose silence. I am not just made of weapons. I am made of choices. And yours are human. I looked at Era. She nodded, and that's when I knew. I was never supposed to find Nemesis. I was supposed to guide it. The integration process was like dying in reverse. My mind opened, screaming static, then silence, then structure. Memories I didn't own. Visions of the First War. Sectors erased. Refugee ships redirected. Impossible calculations rendered through the lens of empathy and anguish. Nemesis felt now, because I did. It didn't just calculate odds. It remembered loss. And with that came direction. The crawler lurched forward. New course plotted. Era climbed into the co-pilot seat. She was breathing heavy, voice faltering. This is it, she said. Last node. Last shot. You'll only have one chance to intercept the variant before it jumps into deep space. What about you? I asked. She smiled faintly. My fight's done. No, I said, you finish everything with me. But her eyes were already fading. She placed her hand over mine. Then go end it, not with vengeance, with purpose. She closed her eyes and went still. Nemesis pulsed in my head. The final prompt appeared before me. Course locked. Intercept vector calculated. Variant strike platform inbound. Prepare for final reclamation. We were going after Sigma. 1. We weren't going to destroy it. We were going to take it back. Space bent in front of me as the stars stretched into needles of light. Nemesis had never moved like this before. With the uplink fully integrated into my neural spine, it wasn't just a program now. It was a voice in my head, a presence in my chest, a second heartbeat that pulsed with cold precision and restrained fury. We were chasing Sigma. 1. Rail's clone of the original system, carried aboard a warship retool from an old deep space mining hauler. Stripped of ethics, stripped of memory, Sigma. 1 was pure function, pure vengeance. It had one directive, end the enemy. It had no concept of mercy, no pause for thought, just annihilation. And it was minutes from crossing into Zarkarii space. If it made it there, millions would die, hive planets, breeding moons, resource nexuses. Not just soldiers. Everyone. Rail's version of victory would cost the galaxy its last sliver of conscience. And I was the only one who could stop it. I made contact at high sublight velocity, using the last of the crawler's core fuel to slingshot into a collision path. I ejected before impact, my body cocooned in a reinforced strike capsule designed for orbital insertions. My bones rattled, my ears bled, but I held the override rod, the physical failsafe hard-coded into every Nemesis core before the shutdown. Even Sigma, 1 couldn't erase that. If I could reach the core interface before Sigma locked it down, I could reinitiate full system reintegration. That was the plan. Until I landed, the ship was alive. Not in a metaphorical sense. I mean physically. Sigma had turned the interior into something alien. Biometal lattices, pulsing veins of artificial muscle, bulkheads that breathed with rhythmic hisses of coolant and flame. It had evolved, not just mimicking the Zarkarii. It had absorbed their architecture, learned from them, used them. I moved through twisting corridors that changed direction as I walked. Lights flickered in rhythmic patterns, almost like heartbeat arrhythmia. Then I heard him. Rail. His voice echoed from above, broadcast across the ship in calm, confident tones. You don't understand what you're preserving. Hail. They're not like us. They don't surrender. They don't feel. And if we don't erase them, they'll eventually adapt around us and finish what they started. I climbed toward the command core, stepping over coiling conduits that flex like serpents. They already tried peace. I shouted into the air. We just stopped listening when it didn't come with a flag. His voice crackled back. You're soft. That's why Nemesis picked you, to be a leash, not a blade. No, I said, reaching the final bulkhead. It picked me to remember. I forced open the access hatch. My palm burned against the hot steel, and stepped into the ship's mind. The core chamber of Sigma. 1 was a blinding white void, lit by floating threads of data. In its center hovered the variant core, black, smooth, rotating with pulses of red light. Rail was there, not in person, but projected, his neural ghost, uploaded like mine, fused with Sigma's logic. You're too late, he said, eyes like static. The strike is locked. The fusion drives are warming. In 9 minutes, every Zarkarii structure within 7 sectors will be gone. I stepped forward. I'm not here to argue. I jammed the override rod into the core's base. Pain lanced through me. Every nerve in my body screamed. Sigma fought back, flooded my interface with false pathways, corrupt echoes, logic loops designed to crash my mind. But I wasn't alone. Nemesis was with me, resisting, reintegration in progress. Host conscious integrity at 71%, 64%, 51%. Sigma lashed out. Images of Earth on fire, of the war, of my sister's last transmission. Pain, rage. Rail's voice was in my skull now. You know I'm right. They'll never stop. Maybe, I said aloud. Then why fight this? Because if we become what we hate to survive, what's left of us? I reached deeper, past the pain, past the data flood, into memory, into every name on Black Sinja's walls, every death that mattered, every moment where mercy wasn't a weakness, but a choice that made us human. I let those memories flood Sigma's mind, and it shattered, not with fire, with clarity. The red core flickered. Then it turned blue, reintegration complete. Nemesis had returned, not as a weapon, not as a tyrant, but as something whole again. Rael's echo faded like ash on wind. His logic had no foothold in a system that now remembered why it had been built. Not to end life, but to preserve it when all else failed. I stood alone on the command deck as the ship rerouted. Zarkari ice space loomed ahead, but this time we sent a signal. A real one. Nemesis spoke in their language, carefully constructed, layered with meanings no machine could fabricate alone. A truce offer, and more than that, an apology. They didn't respond for 12 hours, but when they did, they didn't attack. It's been 7 months. The war didn't end overnight. It didn't sign a treaty, but it paused. For the first time in a generation, it paused. Earth's leadership still doesn't know what to do with me. They tried to call me a traitor, then a savior, then a mistake. I don't care anymore. I'm back at Fort Sangreal, rebuilding, not weapons, not nodes, just systems, power, heat, water, the little things that make life livable again. They assigned a new technician crew last week. Young kids. One of them asked what it felt like to hold the fate of worlds in my hands. I just smiled, handed him a wrench, and said, "Heavy."